Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining my stream this evening. Now, I know many of you will have seen an interview with a very brave doctor from England last week with David Vance, and he's going to continue this evening on my stream telling his story. Dr. David Cartland is one of the bravest doctors in the English-speaking world, in the world at the moment. He works on the front line. He's been a GP for about 10 years and he works within an urgent care setting. And what he hasn't been telling the UK and Ireland about what is going on behind the scenes in hospitals, well, he's really blown their cover in terms of everything that we suspected that went on during the scandemic. And this is somebody who is in there, who witnessed it. And some of what he's going to tell you tonight is really, really going to shock you. So I'm going to bring David in without further delay. How are you doing, Dr. Cartland? Oh, wait, sorry, you're on mute.
Oh.
Okay, off you go.
Good evening, Gemma. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, David. Thank you so much. Now, you've been through a lot, and I think since you probably did your more recent interviews, they're probably coming down a little bit harder on you within the setting that you're working. Is that right?
Yeah, to say I've been censored locally and on the internet, any of the social media platforms at the minute. They don't want me to speak out. And actually, interesting, people who are sharing my interviews as well at the moment, they're now being banned as well. so the name Dr. Cartland's kind of associated as a bad boy of medicine at the moment, when all I'm doing really is speaking the truth. And as you mentioned, saying what I see, the other side of the front line, essentially, and being the eyes and ears of the public.
Absolutely. And you're going to tell us your story again this evening, if you don't mind, because there's a lot of people who may not have seen you on with David Vance last week.
I can promise the shackles are off, Gemma, so, ask what you want.
Great. Tell us first about an email that you received today from your employer in relation to masks.
Just a sweet irony, really. It kind of sums up. I mean, at the moment, I'm working in urgent care, as you mentioned, and the job I left, I've resigned actually because of all of this. When I was working in Cornwall. And so I took a job at an urgent care centre and went to do a shift about 4 weeks ago now, in which they basically demanded, after I'd seen the first patient, that I should wear a mask. And it was a heat wave, it was a hot day. I was sweating from my drive down 90 minutes to the urgent care centre, and I saw the first patient who hadn't been given a bottle of water for 6.5 hours. So, first and foremost, health and safety wasn't paramount in that particular lady's case, but had a tap on the shoulder from some senior nurse saying you need to wear a mask, to which my response really was just, what's the policy, and can you give me the evidence of that policy? To which she just kept quoting religiously, government policy. I said, but if you're mandating something, you need to be able to quote that policy and the evidence base for it. I've got some evidence for you about masks and, et cetera, et cetera. Well, long and short of it was I was told you can't work in that particular position today, and it's essentially time to leave the building 20 minutes into a shift, leaving a department full of sick people, and I was the only doctor that was due on for those last 3 hours. So I asked the question of what's going to happen next if you do send me home for not wearing a mask, and they said, well, we'll shut the department then. I don't think that happened in the end, in all honesty, but that was what the lengths they were willing to go to. Anyway, that's the last I worked there. I haven't worked now on full pay. Now, the issues there were I've been jabbed. I've had 2 vaccines, believe it or not. We can talk about that in a second. But so I'm not unvaccinated. I go into work with a negative test every day, to which I was told by senior management that actually that negative test might be a false negative. So my response to that again was, well, why are we doing them then? It just brings a nonsense to it all. So anyway, like I say,
do you do a PCR test every day?
No, just the lateral flows. Just the lateral flows. So,
what does that involve? Does that involve something going up the nasal passage?
So yeah, it's a swab of the nose around the nasal passage, and then mix it with a bit of liquid and squirt it into one of those lateral flow cassettes.
Is it invasive?
Single use, yeah. I mean, it depends how keen you are to stick it up and how far you want to go with it. But you mix it with this diluent and then drop it in. It's like a pregnancy test, and it comes up with 2 lines if you are. And then, back in the day, that was 10 days off work, fit and healthy. But anyway, long and short of it was going into work as a COVID risk. The reason I was sent home, you're a COVID risk. You're a biohazard to these people. Now, bearing in mind, you're facing people who are likely treble jabbed, quadruple jabbed, and they've got masks on. Some have got visors on. Some have got all sorts on their faces, but, so they're covered from their side. So if these measures do work, as purported, then, their mask and vaccines should have been doing the job, really. Plus, I've got a negative test. And the reason actually was for my own health and safety. I went through the pantomime last year of wearing it in the summer, and they made me genuinely just irritable, drowsy, nauseous. Breathing in your own air is just not very pleasant. And actually, you get a lot of information from patients' faces. You're assessing their pain when you feel their tummy or examining a limb. You get a lot of non-verbal communication. It kind of stumps you as a doctor not seeing people, particularly mental health as well. You need to see the face of the patient. But going back to that, I've been working in my other role for the exact same trust, seeing some very immunosuppressed. It's a homeless job, essentially. I work for and see the homeless community. So they're very, very vulnerable, very immunosuppressed people. But I'm allowed to work in that job without a mask, which is very unusual. Again, it just shows that they kind of the flawed logic in their rules. I'm a biohazard Wednesday, Friday, but on a Thursday, I'm not seeing the most immunosuppressed. And there's certain parts of the building you can go to without the masks on as well. I've worked this week at surgery, a locum surgery. There's no masks in the one, absolutely no masks to be seen. Actually, there's no patients to be seen, to be fair, because they're doing telephone triage. But the second thing is that the pantomime I've witnessed this week in one surgery where I got there with the cleaners were buzzing around first thing in the morning. The nurses and the receptionists were buzzing around. As soon as the doctor stepped foot in the building, masks went on. The pantomime begins. And when you catch a doctor in the coffee room and ask them about masks, they all kind of laugh it off and shrug, and they kind of all know that they don't work and it's a complete pantomime. But that they'll go out of the patient-facing parts of the building and take them straight off. You've seen those videos, I'm sure you have, with politicians when the cameras are rolling, that they're 2 meters apart. They've got the masks on. As soon as the cameras stop, off they go. And the long and short of it, the reason you mentioned this first was that I've had an email tonight from the trust saying, with immediate effect, they plan to withdraw the use of these masks for safety reasons. They've been very grey about what that reason is. I think that's it. Yeah,
that's it there. So they basically said that what is the main? As a result, these items are to be removed from use with immediate effect, and these are the surgical face masks that. Batch testing.
One of those boxes, actually, I took a picture of that exact box at work the other day on the Thursday, and it says on the back, these are for bacteria and dust. These are not for viruses. Anyway, the long and short of it, like I say, I'm suspended at the moment, not able to work because of this mask issue, fully able-bodied. We're in critical incident. We've got an emergency situation down here about, ambulances going miles out of the front door of the hospital. And you've got an able-bodied doctor with a negative test who's vaccinated, seeing vaccinated patients who have got mask upon visor, upon, all that malarkey and not able to work, but in a different setting, allowed to work. And so just it's a bit of a shock really to get that email tonight, just to kind of.
So are you see, and of course, there was a study published there last week. I think it's a Japanese study, and it showed that, of course, as we have been saying all along, that face masks do subject the wearers to bacterial and fungal. You would know all of this, being a doctor, that, there is a high risk of being exposed to bacteria and
Absolutely. I sent that exact study, Gemma, to one of the senior doctors, and I got a message back saying that it's not a brilliant study. It's only a low-powered study. I think there were about 110 people they talked about. Look, if every one of the 110 people have got coliforms, which are bowel bacteria and Pseudomonas and all manner of bacteria you'll see in that article, essentially it's a petri dish being up against your face for 8 to 12 hours. It's not great. And as you can see where you're scrolling there, these are the size of the holes here. Look, if you go back a little bit, the size, there you go. There's the size of the virus, 0.02 microns. And actually, if you look, there's massive holes in these things when you look under an electron microscope. It just doesn't. It's just a pointless exercise. And the mask for me is a tip of the iceberg, but it just demonstrates the double standards and flawed logic that is doing the rounds at the moment, really.
And so basically they're in a bit of a situation now with you. I just wanted to check the numbers. I thought it was more than several hundred. I thought it was over 1,000.
This might be a different study then. I think this is looking at, this is a different study. It's from the Journal of Nature, isn't it?
It was published in Nature, which is very, woke and very pro-climate hoax and all that. So, but look, this is just one of many, many studies that have shown that, you know, masks are absolutely ineffective and dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, Brownstone Institute have put out a kind of compendium really of case studies and cohort studies of showing the outcomes with masks are pretty equitable across the mask wearing nations versus the non-mask wearing nations. But on top of that, you know, actually sometimes the outcome can be worse in the cohorts that have been heavily maskaholic, as I call it.
Maskaholic, very good, very good.
Maskaholic is the other term I use a lot.
And I know that a lot of people, David, will be interested to know how you ended up getting the vaccine. And, you know, let's go back to the beginning of the scandemic. When did you start to suspect that things were not right?
Yeah, I was talking about, it's a kind of game of two halves for me. So I was working in Birmingham at the time, and, you know, watching the same stuff that everyone else was. You know, Italy, people dropping like flies, Wuhan, you know, bad actors falling to the pavement. And, you know, you told there's this deadly virus on the loose. And, you know, and we were kind of winging it from the beginning, really. And the main issue, I would say, in the first year, aside from all the staff doing TikTok videos, etc., it was very quiet, really quiet times. You know, normally, you know, your clinics are full day in, day out. There's never an unfilled slot ever in the history, but, you know, you would get one patient booked in and then you'd have 2 or 3 gaps. And I filled my time doing other things. So I was posting, I was working with a politician locally in the Midlands to take fast food. You know, the time we were banging pans and saucepans on our front drives, you know, it's kind of like elevated these doctors to hero status. And one of the things I was doing, you know, complicit with it all at that particular time. I mean, vaccines weren't around at that point. This was just the early month or two of the virus hitting, essentially, or virus in inverted commas. Yeah, essentially taking pizzas and kebabs and chips and all sorts of donations from these friendly takeaways to the ITU departments, the A&E departments, the COVID wards in the local district generals and the local city hospitals in Birmingham, to be greeted by doctors, again, doing either TikTok videos or painting the nails. And there certainly weren't, I mean, there were the odd hazmat suits going around. Obviously, if they saw somebody with a positive test, the whole suit would go on, etc. But yeah, I mean, at the time, I took a job at the Nightingale Hospital, applied for it, got an offer. That's the last I heard of it. The millions and millions of pounds that went into that scheme of opening these concert halls and, you know, arenas to allow for these bodies and yeah, it was. It never quite happened the way that you kind of imagine. And I'd go back from one of these days at work and see that the BBC was given a very different tale, and the ITV, and you've got these kind of haggard-looking ICU doctors looking emotional with the goggles pressed into their eyes after. And I'm not saying that didn't happen. You know, of course, there were, you know, carefully selected, I'm sure, for the media, but there were obviously people, and I know people in ITU now that have fell out with me because, you know, they've told me about the tip of the iceberg. You know, I'm a primary care doctor, so I only kind of see the broad base of the pyramid, really. But the people who see the sickies are, you know, are seeing, you know, these cases that were purported to be COVID-19 or whatever, you know, bad flu-like illnesses, and ventilating these people. So yeah, very quiet in the beginning, and then it was just a case of really seeing that, you know, as I moved down to Cornwall for a kind of better life, really, the tale kind of started when they started asking me to be vaccinated. I mean, I was vaccinated by choice, the first one. It was because of a friend passing from what I thought was COVID at the time. And there was a lot more to the story than met the eye in terms of, you know, she was in ITU for a long time and had a lot of things happen to her while she was there, such as, you know, they pneumothoraxes, which is where you pop the lung, essentially it's like a punctured lung. And she had that a couple of times. They were turning her back and forth to kind of help her lungs, and they kept pulling the tubes out of her, and she went periods without, you know, midazolam galore, etc. And so, you know, death certificate did read all over the Manchester Evening News that she died of COVID, when actually there were a lot of things that happened. So I took my vaccine within a week of that out of fear.
And which one did you get?
Pfizer, and that was literally, I was front of house in the COVID centre. So I was still at that point, I agreed with myself that I'd done enough research that I was never going to vaccinate anyone. Absolutely not a chance. But they were stuck on the door, like security almost. So while I was there, they had 6 doses per vial. There was 1 left, and they said, do you want your vaccine? So I never thought much of it, and spent 3 days in bed thereafter with a severe headache, like I've never had anything like it before. Like electric shocks in my head, in my body. Debilitated for 3 days, but got up, brushed myself off, got back into it. And the second one came just after a little tap on the shoulder from a colleague at a different surgery to the one I resigned from, saying, you know, there's going to be mandate coming soon. You really should think about having your second one. And, at that point, there was no talk of second, third, fourth vaccine. So, I dodged that bullet for as long as I could. And I always remember that I was never chased around for the flu vaccine. It's a Dr. Cartland, would you like your flu jab? No. And then they walk on to the next person. There was never any secondary kind of gain from it, i.e., you were never going to lose your job if you didn't have the flu vaccine. And the flu vaccine kills, not the flu vaccine, sorry, slip of the tongue. The flu, kills a solid number of people every year. And so that was always a bit odd. And so eventually, after not quite literally chasing me with a needle, but, every day you're going to have your vaccine, you're going to have your second one, you're going to have your second one. I submitted to it. And me and my wife took a little pact and we both had the vaccine. I was fine after the second one. In fact, I don't even know if the needle went in, to be fair. It was that painless. And I never had those headaches. I think the second one was Pfizer. My wife had the second one. She was fine with the first. And after the second one, she had all sorts of issues. I won't say that because that's her own confidential information. But she had
it was your wife a medic as well?
She's not a medic, no.
No. And you do have small children? Yeah,
we've got two small children down in Cornwall and two in the Midlands who've been vaccinated, unfortunately. So that's another story. Mortifying, but yeah, 13 and 11-year-old, double vaccinated. But yeah.
It is very difficult. It's very, very difficult.
So I took it, and then the whole thing came around. A matter of weeks after the second, you need your third. Have your third? I was like, you're taking the mickey now. Seriously, this isn't right. And then, I set about asking them for the evidence base at that point. I was like, come on, you don't have to have 3 flu jabs a year, do you? What's this all about? And the long and short of it was I set about doing an audit. I'd already noticed that there were a lot of people coming in around about September 2021 that we used to get a dumping every day of all the positive results from the labs. And one of the nurses, again, her sole job was to ring up all the people with COVID and say, how are you? Can you breathe okay? And that's what she did day in, day out from the start to the end. What a waste
Terrifying
of time.
Terrifying.
I read all the notes. So I did an audit of 150 patients and I looked at, most people had very, very mild symptoms or mild to moderate at worst, like flu-like illness. Complete waste of everyone's time and money. But the long and short of it was that study that I found, the audit, showed that a vast majority, like of the order of about 96% of them had 3 jabs. So all the positives were treble jabbed. And there was a single double jabbed and a single jabbed and zero unvaccinated in that 150 that I looked at. And that was the start of a sort of journey of discovery, really, there, where I delved down all of the evidence, for different things like the measures around the lockdowns, the measures around masks, the measures around social distancing. It really never made sense to me that one minute the government were, eat out to help out, paying for half your meal, get down the Chinese, we'll pay for half the tab. The next week you couldn't go to a funeral. I don't know if you had that in Ireland, but that's what they did here.
Oh yeah, yes, and you could have a €9 meal, but not a €10 or not €8. Had to be 9.
I've been in clubs and you have to wear the mask as you walk through it, for example. As you walk through you have to wear it on, and you sit down and you can take it off because COVID only attacks standing up people.
Standing up, it's such an intelligent virus, unbelievable.
In certain parts of buildings as well.
Yeah, before you move on to the next question, which I want to ask you why you think it is that you started to question things, but your colleagues didn't. So just mull over that for a second. But just to get back to that mass study, yeah, you are correct. It was only, I just want to clarify that, it was only 109 volunteers in that one. But if people go to, this is a fantastic site. I'm not sure if you know it, David, Swiss Policy Research. It's swprs.org. And I would say it's one of the best medical sites for all of these studies and the reports that have been done. So they outline all of the peer-reviewed, WHO, World Health Organization, real world evidence studies, you name it, they're all in there. And I think the vast overwhelming majority of them say that they do not work and that they are dangerous. So if people want to have a look at that, David, I might just also give you a glimpse into what was going on in our biggest neurological hospital in the country. So this is the hospital that will be dealing with the bulk of the clots. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a new name actually for the suddenly deaths, and it's anything ABV disease, anything but the vaccine. When we see all these people, young people dropping dead, that's what we call it now, ABV, anything but the vaccine. I'm just going to play a short clip and you might give your views on this, David, of the director of nursing in Beaumont Hospital, the biggest acute hospital in Dublin, where whistleblowers came to me last year and said that they were being told the most outrageous things about the vaccine. For example, one of the top consultants, in top in inverted commas, consultants said that AstraZeneca was going to save the world, but little did he know that he was being recorded at the time. And this hospital took me to court last summer, but they didn't realize that we had all of these recordings because the brave nurses and healthcare workers had been taking these recordings because they knew what they were being told was, in my opinion, criminal, because their lives were being put at risk. So this is Mary Murray, Director of Nursing.
My job as a director of nursing is to protect patients and their staff. So as a result, everybody working on the front line must be vaccinated. Yeah, so you won't be on the front line. We'll find an alternative job for you. And we'll just need to find an office and space. I suppose you can't touch patients. I suppose you can't touch patients. And you can't see patients. And you can't see patients. They're safe with any of the vaccines. What I'm saying is Pfizer is the one that has the research. That's all I'm saying. And the reason I say that is because the whole of America have used Pfizer. So Pfizer is in most arms. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca is the only one that's not recognized in Ireland. I think this is Sputnik. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca is the only one that's not recognized in Ireland. I think this is Sputnik. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca is very safe. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca. Johnson & Johnson is very safe. AstraZeneca.
That's just one little clip of that. What do you make of that? You know, she's saying Johnson & Johnson very safe, AstraZeneca is very safe, but Pfizer is the one they love because it's in most arms.
Yeah, I mean, it's mortifying to watch that, actually. It's quite emotional to see any of it because, you know, these are the people I've been fighting for. These are the people that haven't been given any voice in all of this, you know. Yeah, I mean, all I would say is, and you know, these claims, people have learned the buzzwords, haven't they? They've learned the safe and effective, like a parrot style. And what we all need to remember is actually, and I've seen this in my own area that I work in, is, you know, when there's been protesters down at the Children's Vaccine Centre, and all they've done as concerned parents is, when they're told safe and effective, is quite rightfully, before they inject their children, you know, show us the evidence, and the burden of proof for any medical treatment whatsoever is always on the injector, the doctor. The reason that doctors get the high esteem that they seem to love is that you know, you have to be evidence-based. You have to do everything you do has got to be researched. It's got to be up to date. That's our job, to do all of that on behalf of the patient, so you can provide them with the best care. What I can tell you from my 2 years is that doctors, even this week, I bumped into the person who vaccinated me, believe it or not, by complete chance, and they don't know the first thing about what is in the vial. Now, I've talked before about, I've got a letter from the RCGP, which is the Royal College of General Practitioners, that say, you know, we've asked a question about safety and effectiveness, and why aren't you telling patients at the point of informed consent why? You know, what are the safety data? You keep saying safe and effective. Well, in the safe part of that sentence, where's the safety data? Because, as you know well, you know, the trials are, you know, the ones that they try to hide for 75 years aren't good reading, to be honest. And yeah, the burden of proof is, so, you know, if I say this antibiotic is safe, then I need to be able to look my patient in the eye and prove it to them. And unfortunately, that burden of proof isn't being fulfilled by the doctors and the nurses, who, this particular occasion I'm talking about, when we sent the protesters down to the Vaccine Centre for Children, could have very easily dispersed this crew of placard-bearing, concerned parents, quite rightfully concerned, because they were watching their healthy children or being told that their healthy children needed this vaccine for lots of different reasons, mostly not around health, mostly around going back to school or traveling or et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it's just appalling that doctors aren't giving patients what they demand of them, the evidence. So it's effective even, I mean, always, and this is what I say to people now, always demand that of your doctor. So even if you're considering the 4th jab, 5th jab, 6th jab, whatever it is, go and ask them the date, what's in the vial. And I meant to say just actually that RCGP document that I've got not only says that we can't give patients the information about safety because that data doesn't exist. I've got that in black and white. And then the second thing they say in the same paragraph is that we can't tell people what's in the vaccine because we do not know the ingredients. And that's the Royal College of General Practitioners president. Now that for me is the end of the discussion around consent. Whatever conversation goes in and around the injection, moment of injection. If you don't know what the person, what's being injected into the patient, then you can't be given informed consent. Now, the people who were injecting Gemma weren't people that were fully qualified. I would have students sitting in with me for a morning surgery, physicians associates, etc., or very junior nurse practitioners in their training in the local university sitting in with me and say, oh, Dr. Cartland, I have to go now. I'm doing vaccinating this afternoon. Now, these people were not alone in that. They were going around with other administrative staff and other very junior non-clinical staff, you know, who've done a couple of hours on the computer doing an online module. I know because I've done that module myself. And yeah, vaccinating people. I mean, just the concept of giving a needle with something that you don't know the actual ingredients of into the hands of an untrained person, it's absolute absurdity. And people don't know. I mean, they're going in with the full trust in the practitioner. They don't know these people who are physicians associate students, for example. They don't know they're not qualified because they're not introducing themselves and say, hi. I think they think twice, say, hi, Mrs. Jones. I'm not qualified, but can I give you this injection? You'd run a mile out of the door, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Wouldn't you? I mean, but people just don't ask that question. Well, first of all, can I just find out what's in it? And if they knew, and of course, this is, I'm sure you know this site, learntherisk.org. This is the site belonging to the Merck whistleblower Brandy Vaughan, who we suspect was murdered in last year. And she was doing unbelievable work, and she put together these fantastic little flyers that she was giving out all around America. I think we can open it up there. Oh, I've lost the whole page now. Sorry. I've gone out of, okay. And all of this, like aborted fetal cells, mercury. Have we lost we lost the screen share. Sorry. Let me just get that back. Mercury and what else? Aluminium,
polyethyl glycol.
Absolutely. E. coli, barium, MSG, genetically modified yeast. You see, they need all of these ingredients to make up their cocktail.
I mean, I would say I've witnessed it, and I called it Vaccine Central in the end. So while I was back at the surgery seeing the sick people, they were descending upon a centralised vaccine centre. Every medical doctor, nurse, qualified or unqualified, would descend, and they were vaccine. And I've witnessed the process. I mean, they're literally not asking anything other than have you had a reaction to your previous 6 or 3, whatever they've had. And then the sleeves up. Hi, Doris, any allergies? You're not pregnant, are you? Make a joke about Doris at 90 being pregnant, laugh it off. Before they know it, the needle's in, the plunger's pressed. And actually, they get given a stopwatch. They get sat outside for 15 minutes, move on to the next one like a conveyor belt. It was all in sync. But what wasn't going on was, that conversation around, just basic information, safe and effective, how so? And actually, if it isn't safe and it turns out to have a reaction associated with it, like those poor people in the video, they weren't being given the information on how to report it. The yellow card system in the UK, it's called. The vast majority of people I speak to now, either in the street or in clinic, even doctors don't know or don't even have time to fill these things in. Aside from the fact no one will, blaspheme and put anything down to the vaccine, as you mentioned from previous slide, wasn't it? It's no one will attribute causation to it. Somebody can drop down dead in the vaccine centre afterwards. You saw it on the BBC documentary. She said about they used an example of a child who had a fit, and the guy answered the phone rather than injected him, and then he had the fit anyway. So actually, if he gave the needle into the child and the child then fitted, everyone would think it would be the vaccine that caused it when he fitted anyway. Well, that's fine. I understand that. But, how many coincidences are we seeing at the moment?
Absolutely. And but just getting back to that question, though, that I was asking you about why you think you have taken a step back and started to question it and say there's something not right here. I mean, is it that all of your colleagues are completely financially beholden? They have big mortgages, they cannot see a way out. And, they maybe feel, well, if I say now that I've been partly involved in a genocide, am I going to get in trouble? I mean, I'm convinced hospital management are saying to staff, you're part of this now. And, you've been carrying out this vaccination program. So you have to be very careful about what you admit to. Could that be a possibility?
I mean, two parts of the question, really. I mean, the reason why I came to the conclusion was, not deep research, not deep statistical methods and epidemiology. Like Google told me the answer. You can Google what are the studies around vaccine harms, and you can find studies around this sort of stuff. All of social media is filled in when you've not got censorship like we're having now, of stories of, and I've seen it with my own eyes. So it wasn't a deep dive into anything more than common sense. Like I did a previous degree in sort of immunology, virology, biomedical sciences. So I kind of knew that things like the asymptomatic transmission thing was, there is a thing about pre-symptomatic. If you get somebody sneeze over you, there'll be a time between you getting a symptom and you developing flu-like symptoms, for example. So there is that pre-symptomatic, but this whole thing that you could kill your granny whilst being completely fit and healthy for the whole day was just absurd. So lots of things, lockdown, social distancing, blah, blah, blah. But going right up to now, I mean, I've seen it this last few weeks. I mean, I've been shut down on all of the social media platforms for spreading misinformation. But I was starting to get a few messages through just before I was suspended again permanently from both Instagram and Twitter and Facebook this week. Doctors stepping forward and saying, ringing up and saying, I've seen some of your interviews. What have I done? I've been vaccinating pregnant women. What have I done? And it happened this week. Doctors I often in the coffee room will share the fruits of my very basic research. And, if the doctors aren't scurrying out of the room, and you can see it in their eyes that they know what's coming. They just don't want to hear it. And like this week, I had a lovely group of nurses that sat and listened to me at a surgery that I locumed at. And they were brilliant. And you know what? They were all vaccinators. One was a pregnant vaccinator being told that she needed to have the vaccine. And they were really disappointed. I only sat there with them for 15, 20 minutes. And there was an atmosphere around because people were popping in and out of the coffee room to sort of make me feel a bit uncomfortable and to shut up, essentially. But the nurses listened. And the questions to me were, Dave, why have we not been told this? One example, pregnancy, the Pfizer trial itself, reported a 1 in 4 severe adverse reaction in pregnant women in the 270 people that were incidentally pregnant. The MHRA have said we should not be vaccinating pregnant women or breastfeeding women. And that was written in July 2021, and we were vaccinating from December 2020. And they were kind of stunned at these statistics. And, over the week and the prior week, doctors who've heard me on my soapbox in the coffee room have tapped me on the shoulder and said, Dave, I heard what you said in the coffee room. You're absolutely right on all of that. I've had concerns as well. And I'm saying to them, look, why don't you speak out then? And you get the whole, mortgage and the, I've made my case. Well, newsflash, I've got a mortgage myself. Well, I've heard about what you've been through with the GMC and the NHS England. Don't really want that for myself. So there's that element of self-preservation. The other element to it, I think, is that they've been complicit. Not only have they been duped themselves into taking 3 vaccines. I mean, all the doctors are off down here at the minute with COVID, and they're 3 or 4 jabs down. Yet, they're praising God that, that they'd been ITU had it not been for the vaccine, and begging for their autumn booster, rather than actually a questioning saying these damn things, they're not worth the paper they're written on. They're not working. And I mean, we're seeing it now. A lot of Fauci, Biden, they're onto about their 3rd back-to-back COVID infection, and they're all vaccinated to the hilt. So yeah, I mean, there's also, they're subject to the same fear propaganda. They're subject to the same, financial. There is financial incentive. They're obviously vaccinating at 15 quid a go. So that's per vaccine. So that's an opportunity to, do whatever they want to do with that money, but clear the debts, etc. So that there's money to be made. They're not going to be made rich by £15 per vaccine, but there's money made. And that whole thing. If they've been pushing it on children, they've been pushing it on pregnant women, then there's blood on their hands. And they need to speak out because the dam's bursting now. The dam's bursting, and they're going to be guilty as charged, unfortunately. This whole we were doing what the government told us is no defence in a court of law. That we just did what he said. I mean, I had it at my surgery, you know, the practice manager was quitting because of the mandate. And she completely agreed that it was absolute nonsense that we could actually coerce somebody into a medical treatment. I've had doctors and nurses up country say to me, you know, I work from home in an office doing triage and they're making me do vaccines. I'd be vaccinated. And the other thing is these vaccine harms now, the vaccine injuries, there's a torrential flow of people that are vaccine injured. I mean, I've been working in 2 weeks in a locum surgery and it's like the winter, it's like the middle of winter. I'm doling out antibiotics for people. I'm seeing conditions that I've never seen, you know, you see once every couple of years, 3 years, like Bell's palsy. Had 2 Bell's palsies in one morning. Now, Bell's palsy is similar to shingles in that it's a herpes zoster infection of the facial nerve, essentially, and you get droopy stroke-like symptoms. And shingles was shingles day on Tuesday. I had 2 women, again, never had this in my life, doctor, but I've had shingles twice now in a month. And it's really agony, and can you give me some pain relief, etc. And, you know, and everything in between, you know, doling out antibiotics for the sort of peak of winter infections in June and July and August. You know, the 20, 30-year-olds treble vaccinated onto the 3rd course of antibiotics. These are non-smokers. These are people who don't get chest issues. And we're in the peak of the summer now. Why is this happening? So there's evidence for me from my experience of urgent care and working in primary care on the coalface that people's immune systems aren't working very well.
Clearly. And I mean, normally at this time of year, it would be so quiet, I imagine. You might see some sun-related. Yeah.
But all the doctors are off, Gemma. The doctors are all off. I mean, literally, I'm locuming up and down Cornwall because the doctors are off with COVID.
Well, it's not COVID, though. It's vaccine injury, I would say.
Well, vaccine injury / you know, a test that's not very good. Telling them that they've got COVID. I mean, these tests are just. I remember when we first received a batch of them in our surgery, and I won't say where, but you know, working and boxes and boxes of these little plastic cassettes. Bearing in mind, you've got Greta Thunberg talking about climate change and plastic waste and all that. We've got these single-use cassettes, masks filling the ocean, etc. Heaving, you know, landfill sites with all these visors that were never used. Massive money changing hands, though, to produce this amount of plastic products. It's insanity. It's and imagine being a medic in all of this, and you just can't get a doctor to. I keep joking about somebody having a vaccine and their head falling off the next day, and then people taking their decapitated head into the surgery and sticking it on their GP's desk and saying, "Look, this happened yesterday. I had my vaccine. Head fell off today." The doctor won't suspect the vaccine whatsoever. Just because
that's why it's anything but the vaccine disease, I think, is, you know, that is a very suitable name.
Well, the thing doing the rounds at the moment is this sudden adult death syndrome nonsense where, you know, they've took out all the safeguarding around somebody's death. You know, they've stopped postmortems straight from the hospital to the cremation. Part 2 doctoring is what I used to do. So I used to be the doctor that quizzed the Part 1 doctor, the person who certified and verified the death, to make sure that everything added up. It was kind of a safety net, so you couldn't just put anything willy-nilly on the death certificate. And I've heard people certify deaths as COVID, many, and that's only in my scope of practice. You know, you sent a patient in with stroke or heart attack, the death certificate comes through, COVID. And that, of course, that gets added to the 180,000 in this country anyway, knowing damn well that person did not die of COVID. I mean, you see all the things like the children that have died from COVID. And these children were, I mean, firstly, they're dying within 28 days of positive tests, so they're not dying off COVID. They're dying within 28 days of a flimsy test that doesn't work. But secondly, these kids are poorly. I think the American data just showed that 500 children have died of COVID out of 20 million, I think, across the USA. And of those 500 children, 94% or something similar had 4 or more comorbidities, i.e. they were sick kids. You know, I've seen people with cancer, with COVID-19. I've seen people with dementia that were just in bed, you know, not eating, not drinking, die of their dementia and old age or Alzheimer's, put as COVID-19. Just incredible. And obviously the figures are going up and up and up.
Absolutely unbelievable. David, we've a big audience watching tonight, both on my site and also on Getter. And you're getting so much support here. You know, you really have an awful lot of support in Ireland as well as in your home country. And I know people are, of course, my screen has just gone there, but I know that people probably want to send you the comments are flying up there. So they want to send you their very best wishes. And it's just so rare for a doctor to come out. You know, in Ireland, we really haven't had any that we can say. I mean, there's been one here, you know, but not really here or there, but they haven't really been consistent. And, you know, have you been contacted by other doctors who have spoken out, who are saying, you know, who are giving
I mean, there's a very small network of us. I mean, I'm part of a couple of groups. One's called the Heart Group, which is very, very supportive in terms of, I mean, they're very, very evidence-based. I mean, again, social media, they're made out to be complete lunatics, and I think the word's quacks, but these guys, everything's evidence-based. Everything's evidence-based. Part of vaccine advisory committees, you know, everything that these people do has got a firm evidence-based reference. And I've said it all the way through this, you know, people don't afford me the same respect of giving me a reference. For example, something simple like safe and effective, prove it. I've challenged people to give me a single study, or even to debate me actually privately or personally, or publicly, should I say, to debate this sort of stuff, because I know my statistics now. I've been deep into it for quite a while now, and people won't debate you. So yeah, anyway, in answer to your question, I'm waffling on, is there is a bit of support, but people obviously don't want to speak out because they've seen that GMC have been after me, NHS England have been after me. You know, nothing's ever come of it. Those cases are closed now. But you know, there's always that kind of, you know, it's stressful, you know, and all I've done is really for zero secondary gain. Nothing that I do has ever been paid for. Everything's for free. The reason I do it is because I took an oath at graduation for my patients to, you know, make them my prime concern, to keep up to date with medical practice. And the funny thing is, I had the chief medical officer remind me of my professional behaviour the other day, to which my response was, funny that, because, you know, I'm a bit concerned about 99.9% of doctors' professional behaviour, actually. And I actually ran rings around him, talking about the duty of candour, whistleblowing, etc. You know, for which I'm not supporting any of that. As a genuine whistleblower with genuine concerns, with just wanting to uphold my Hippocratic oath of do no harm, you get punished. You know, I've talked about social media. I've been suspended for being a spreader of misinformation, where all I do, I mean, the one interview I've been banned from LinkedIn is me literally holding up the documents to the screen, reading off them, quoting where they're from, giving the page reference, the reference so the public can find it, and reading off the government data, the Pfizer data, you know, when they're referring to their own product as gene therapy and the problems associated therewith. You know, I've read it off, and then that gets labelled with a stamp, misinformation, banned without appeal, Dr. Cartland. And in doing so, you lose that support network, really. You lose that network of doctors and people that are just starting to step out of the shadows and have approached me for some support and advice. That was happening in the real world, you know, and I do miss that. I mean, I am still going just about, if anyone wants to find me on Getter and what's the other one, Truth Social.
Yes, so yeah, you are on Getter, and people will see your account on my account. I'm just looking at can we see you there? Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm just looking at the chat. You're getting so many positive comments here. People are saying that there's an interruption on the stream. I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's on my website, though. If anyone has any questions now for Dr. Cartland, now is the time to ask him, because I know some people are questioning the whole concept of COVID. And I have to say I am a COVID denier, because it has never been isolated under under a microscope. I suspect it was just the normal winter flu, which I think a lot of which is being caused by the flu jabs. You think there is something there?
Well, I mean, I've always said it's flu rebranded. I've been public about that. You know, it's you know, what happened to the flu figures for the last 2 years. You know, if you go on any of the government data websites, you know, flu disappeared, zero figures. So, you know, I think there was something out there that was viral in origin. You know, it was probably the flu, and people were getting short of breath. I've seen a couple of people. You know, I'm not going to deny and go completely. You know, this silent hypoxia, I'd never heard of that in my career, for example. And there were people that were breathless and sitting quite healthy looking with saturations of 80%, whilst not knowing that. So, I mean, there are these anomalies that I can't explain. But as I said from the beginning, both sides of the fence, I'm speaking out on observations that I've seen with my own eyes, as opposed to anything else. I mean, I get what you're saying, Gemma, about I have to kind of stay on the fence with that.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. Listen, I mean, I know what you are going through, because in 2012, Hillary Clinton's, or the Clintons' biggest Irish donor, took over my newspaper where I had worked for nearly 20 years. And I was embroiled in exposing an awful lot of police corruption at the time. And they started to target me and basically say, you can't continue this work. You know, you have to give up this anti-corruption stuff. And I basically said, I'll see you in court. But I was amazed that people that I had worked with for nearly 20 years were suddenly, you know, I thought, well, everyone is going to get up and walk out if they go ahead with this. And the union even had a vote as to whether, you know, the company could be allowed to get away with what they were doing to me, basically telling me that if I didn't stop what I was doing, I was out. And I had a permanent pensionable job, you know. So I was one of their chief reporters. But the silence of my colleagues, people who I considered friends, and it made me realize, you know, like, you come into this world on your own and you go out on your own. And in between, there's a lot of times when you can count your friends on the fingers of one hand. And in the end, even though my colleagues voted against my unlawful dismissal, which the courts subsequently found that it was unlawful, they didn't stand up in the end. I mean, all they had to do was say, right, we're not printing the Irish Independent tomorrow. This can't be allowed to happen, because if they go for her, then if they get away with that, they're coming for us now.
You've got a brilliant point there, Gemma, there, and that, you know, you can stop these things as a collective, can't you? So all these doctors are, you know, you don't have to go on interviews. I mean, I hate doing these things, but I wouldn't sleep at night knowing that I hadn't done them, you know. And I get people are shy, and I get they've got their, but actually that collectively we could put an end to this tomorrow. You can start as a collective, the public, you know, 99% of the public versus 1% government, you know, that whole elite, people who think that they own, that they self-professed elite, should I say. You could stop it immediately by standing together, but unfortunately people aren't willing to question things, and we've got into this mentality of accepting what the government tells me. I mean, the older generation particularly, they're the ones that you can't get any sort of conversation out of, because they trust the government, and they trust that they're used to that paternalism around being told what to do, you know, how high they can jump. Same with doctors, they trust their doctors implicitly. You know, it really upsets me that more doctors haven't spoken out, even when they kind of wake up gently in the background to support me, really, and not to support me, support their patients and to support children. We're talking about, you know, the three things I've stood upon, my three soapboxes have been around consent, which you've talked about. You know, you can't, you know, the whole profession's built upon giving patients information about that intervention, both sides, the positives and the negatives. And actually, if a patient disagrees, then more than, you know, it may not be wise to us, it may not be logical to us, but as long as you've said the pros of that course of antibiotics versus the cons of them, you might get thrush and diarrhea, then I've done my job. I've counselled both sides of the spectrum. And actually, if to say, Dave, I'm willing to run the risk, I don't want the antibiotic. Never in my career have I pinned Mrs. Jones down, pinched her nose and poured the liquid down the throat. That would be assault and battery. But the secondary, I mean, I wouldn't say secondary gains, really, because people aren't getting secondary gains. They're just getting the freedoms that were taken off them originally, their human rights to travel, to work, all the human freedoms that we enjoy were taken away to be given back after you've had the vaccine. I mean, there's jobs now in the paper that I keep seeing of NHS staff. You must be vaccinated to be able to apply for this job. I had to prove my vaccination status to have this job. If I had anything less than 2, I wouldn't have been able to work here. I mean, that's illegal for starters. Nothing makes sense. It's madness.
No, nothing. I mean, I think the only way that, because things have got so crazy now, I saw today, I think the UN and the EU, and they've come together once again. Well, they're all one and the same. And they're dealing now, they want to stop the spread of not coronavirus anymore, but conspiracy theorists. Yes, they've finally come out and said it, that there's a virus of conspiracy theorists and they need to be dealt with. They have to stop the spread and flatten the curve. So goodness knows what they will do. But they're getting very, very worried when they have to actually, you know, more and more people are saying, okay, there's something with this whole conspiracy theory thing. And once you learn, well, it was actually a term devised by the CIA to label people who question John F. Kennedy's death. That's why they, you know, so that's, you know.
The thing is that how can things be called conspiracy theory when they come true? By definition, they're not a theory anymore when they've happened. I think we're running out of conspiracy theories now because they're all prophetically being fulfilled one after the other.
One after the other. Yeah, I know people, you know, who are now questioning all of the vaccines. And I mean, that's one of the best it's probably the best thing that has come out of all of this, that people are starting to question all vaccination, especially the MMR and the HPV.
I keep thinking if I was somebody who'd been treble, quadruple jabbed, not only would I be thinking how many jabs does it take to actually work, but you've got a doctor here that's been a doctor for however many years. It's been 14 years this year. I did a previous degree in immunology, virology, microbiology. You know, if this doctor can't speak out freely and openly and just telling people what he sees with his own eyes, you know, with my own eyes, and he's been censored on social media, he can't speak out. You post a video now, for example. I mean, the people who are actually vaccine injured are posting their own personal testimonies, and that's being taken down as misinformation. This is a huge red flag for me if I was somebody who was a vaxaholic now.
Yes.
I'm just going to have to put the plug on. I'm about to lose the battery.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Let me just read some of these. So the COVID bioweapon and its variants are very real. It is criminal. Conspiracy in itself, says Green Jacket. Well, I don't believe it is a bioweapon, but I believe that the vaccine is. So they're talking about all sorts of things. I think, are you okay there, Dave?
I'm back alive now. The battery's going.
And they are talking about 5G and all of the various other so-called conspiracy theories. What is it like? I mean, at the moment, you're not really going into work as such, are you?
Well, I'm filling my time doing locums and things, like I say, covering for the doctors that are off with COVID. So I'm making hay while the sun shines, essentially.
So you're not, financially, you haven't been financially deprived as a result of this, except that you don't.
No, I mean, we're in the middle of a killer pandemic, and I did resign in the end from the surgery that I worked at down here before this job. It's almost like a protest resignation because I was trying to bring these conversations to the coffee room or one-on-ones, casual conversations. And I followed the correct channels as well. Approach practice manager, approach senior partners. I've got this concern. I'm seeing a hell of a lot of blood clots. I'm doing a hell of a lot of cancer referrals. I'm doing one a month usually, and I was doing 3 every week, and I only do 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And I was saying, are we auditing any of this? Are you guys seeing the same thing? Oh, I don't want to hear your conspiracy theories, Dave. It's like, no, I'm just asking a question here. I mean, I've been called names. I've been, pushed. I've been called a COVIDia. The one particular day when I resigned, all the staff in the surgery stood up. One complained that I was disturbing his coffee time because I wanted to present the data on myocarditis. One of the doctors professed that they'd seen the evidence that they were safe and effective on the BBC. And then they all marched out and left me with the two senior people from the practice who professed to me that they agreed with what I said about the children, particularly, and they were never vaccinating the children at all. Our surgery will not be vaccinating children. The very next day, they advertised the vaccine centre for children on the website of the surgery. And so I resigned at that point. Enough was enough. I just thought, I can't work amongst these people. They clearly, obviously, and when you ask them why they did that, they said because the CCG have told us. That was their answer.
Unbelievable. And that's the standard answer. Yeah, it's government policy.
Where does that stop? If we do what people tell us to do all the time, then, if I tell you to murder someone, are you going to do it? Probably a bad example when we're talking about vaccines. But I was just about to mention, actually, about a study that really lit my face up this week. Is in the UK, obviously, they went... Professor Enos, his name is, so I would direct anyone to find him on social media. He talked about a study, and it looked at, so forget part COVID for a minute, so it looked at all-cause mortality, excess mortality, and that's a phenomenon we're seeing a lot of now at the minute, of people dying more than ever. I mean, the insurance companies are talking about it, the funeral directors are talking about it, but the reason I mention it now is that during the second wave of vaccination, giving people the second shots, after a short lag after that vaccine rollout hit the date, there was a few weeks delay, and then in reverse order, which correlated with the age groups that they did, so they went from 80s to 70s to 60s to 50s, there was a sort of reverse trend in age of all-cause mortality, i.e. people were dying in reverse age order. a certain amount of weeks from the vaccine rollout. And so obviously that was subject to a couple of things. It could well be that the vaccine was killing people and causing that all-cause mortality, or it could have been something else like, GPs now are still phone calls. There's such a bottleneck in the services now because people are not seeing their doctor face to face, and doctors aren't. They're doing these phone calls and Zoom calls and rarely getting their hands on. So all that pathology is being missed. So at that point you can argue that there's a confounding factor. It could have been that, or it could have been both. But then the government gave us a further gift of doing a booster. And exactly the same. They repeated the experiment, for want of a better phrase, and then the exact same thing happened again following the booster rollout, jab number 3, in reverse age order after a short delay. Firstly the 80s to 70s, 70s to 60s, people dropping. And I'll just direct the viewers really to a guy called Professor Enos, who spoke a lot about this. And the data there is just...
How do you spell his name?
Enos, E-N-N-O-S.
E-N-N-O-S. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd say it's very hard. There's so many studies coming out now that it's actually hard to keep up with them, which is great in a way.
This is one of I'm a big sports person. I like watching and playing sports. This statistic you pulled up now, people like Matt Letizia have spoken out, just saying, look, we're watching a lot of footballers collapsing and dying on the pitch. This needs investigation. And rather than investigating it and being neutral like anything else and conduct a study, which will show you the statistics like you're showing there with athletes, 1,700, isn't it, % increase, yeah. He's been shunned and he's been treated like a criminal. He's been, kicked into the shadows, treated like a lunatic. And the guy's just questioned, and all he's really done is say, look, this doesn't add up. We need to investigate it. And in his career as a footballer even, he spoke out and said, look, I've never seen all these people collapsing, clutching the chest. This needs to be looked into. And you're seeing that in the army, you're seeing it on the athletics field, you're seeing it on tennis courts, golf courses, people dropping down in unprecedented numbers of sudden adult death syndrome. Now, you can but speculate what that was.
Isn't that an unbelievable figure that, it'd be pre the vaccine, 28 athletes died per year for no apparent reason, possibly because they were putting too much pressure on their hearts. But
you see in the media, Gemma, you see when these sudden deaths happen, it's every day now, you only have to flick on social media or the news. Someone's died suddenly in their sleep. I've been alive for, I'm not going to say exactly how long, but around about 40 years. I know I don't look it. But, they're always really sheepish and coy about their vaccine status. Even the most high profile, you can read between the lines. If they're an elite athlete or an elite sports person, they probably would have had to have the vaccine. But this is never mentioned. This is information that's very pertinent to the public, being deliberately kept from them. If a famous tennis player's dropped down dead or dropped down with a heart attack, you've got every right to wonder what the vicinity of that booster was to that incident. There is footage of people that come off the tennis court, for example, saying, I can't breathe, oh, my chest, I've not been right since the booster. Those words have come out of the athlete's mouth. And, that's from the internet forever.
Yeah, and look at that number. Last year, 394 deaths. They're the ones that we know about. This year is looking pretty much the same. But David, I always say to people who, believe in the whole thing, I say, okay, before this began in 2019, let's have a look at how the government ran the health service. What sort of a health service was it? Do you remember that, every single winter there were people dying on trolleys, hospital waiting lists were about 1 million. People, were not getting good results from chemo. They were not getting good results from other pharmaceutical products. What makes you think that the government gives a damn about your health or is able to run a health service? There was no evidence of that. And then
it's been a shambles for 10 years, hasn't it now? The whole reason we had all of these measures, it wasn't for your health. It was to save the NHS, if you remember. 2 weeks to flatten the curve to save the NHS. Well, unfortunately, once the Titanic has struck the iceberg, it's going down. So whether you lock people down or not, it's still going down. So this is the example I give, in that the NHS has been a sinking ship for a long time. And, we need to acknowledge that for starters. And we're trying to stick plasters over these massive wounds at the moment of, social services are broken. We've sacked a load of carers who wouldn't be vaccinated. So people coming out of hospital are either just dumped out of hospital or they're just waiting for social work processes to happen. So a complete bed blocked exit point to the hospital. And the traffic keeps coming in from the front end as well. So you've got these hospitals, even now, full capacity. You know, we're in critical incident at this trust that I work for now, you know, and we're in the summer. So God help us in the winter, and it's got worse year on year on year. And I speak to a lot of A&E doctors and ITU intensivists. You know, the capacity is just not there in the system. So, you know, it really is a time to look at alternatives.
You must be dreading. You must be absolutely dreading. Do you have, just before I ask you the next question, and the other thing I try to say to people, you know, to say to them, do you know that Pfizer paid the biggest fine in criminal history, 2.3 billion, for bribing doctors, for lying about the effectiveness of their drugs, for basically being engaged in fraud? Are you happy to take a vaccine? But you see, they don't know this, even though it is all over the mainstream media, and there's nothing they can say to that.
No, there isn't. I mean, these cases have been ruled, and they I mean, that's an official, you know, a payout, isn't it? And I mean, Pfizer have had all sorts of lawsuits over the years, but nothing instills public, you know, public confidence. Like, firstly, under an emergency use authorization, taking indemnity from prosecution, so that if you do harm somebody from your product that's been hastily produced, that you don't have to pay the compensation. The government does, the taxpayer does. And secondly, you go to the measures of hiding your data for 75 years, which they've obviously now been forced to release. Anyone who's got a spare few days, read those documents, because you wouldn't let anyone near a jab. I won't name the company, just I don't want to be libelous specifically, but yeah, you wouldn't let your hamster near the jabs if you read the documents. Shabby science, shabby methods, shabby statistics, terrible outcomes across the board, whether it's rats or humans. Absolutely appalling. And I'll just remember back to the beginning of my career, the pharmaceutical industry used to send out drug reps to the doctors at lunch breaks, or I mean, before my generation, when you used to get a free pen and, you know, maybe a stethoscope or something like that. That's the limit I got in terms of the covert bribery. Prescribe our drug. This is the evidence, with a few buzzwords. Here's his free stethoscope and a sandwich. But they used to cart doctors off in my previous generation, the now senior GPs and senior doctors, off to Hawaii, off to here, there and everywhere, all expenses paid. Prescribe our drug. We're the best in the industry. Here you go. Here's a margarita. Here's a 5-star hotel. And they've stopped that now. Absolutely. They've stopped that now because of presumably ethical grounds. And they've actually stopped the free pens and everything now. So you don't see drug reps anymore. But that was going on even, 10, 15 years ago. You'd be whipped off 5-star, all expenses paid trip to New York City, you know, the Maldives, etc.
Yes, everything laid on, and then you never know what might go on. I mean, somebody did tell me a story about Pfizer, which is unrepeatable. But you know, someday I might be able to repeat it. I'd need to substantiate it more. But look, we know the criminal.
I'm going to light a fire now, Gemma. Speaking to somebody who's left the drug industry, like an ex-Pfizer employee, is a little bit like speaking to somebody after they've left the Freemasons and getting the inside info. And that's all I'm going to say about the Freemasons.
You've left, have you? Can you?
No, I wasn't a Freemason. I'm just saying, speaking to an ex-Pfizer employee and getting the dirt from them is exactly the same as speaking to a Freemason who's left Freemasonry. You get all the dirt of what's happened there. And there's a lot of those people in the medical industry. Let's say, lots of them.
There are. I mean, Dr. Mike Eden, obviously, he's a real exception, and you know, but a lot of them are you know, they speak out and then suddenly you never hear from them again. So I'm not saying Pfizer, of course, wouldn't be involved in anything like that. But, you know, these companies are very, very dangerous. They're in the business of profit, not healthcare. And, you know, as I think you will agree, good health does not come from the end of a needle. You know, it just doesn't.
Well, I've learned so many things in my career that, you know, outside of the lecture theatre, really. I've been asked in previous interviews, have you ever been given a lecture on nutrition, holistic healthcare? I mean, you train as a doctor to see these people who practice things like reflexology, alternative health techniques, acupuncture as being complete quacks, being completely lunatic. And actually, when you speak to people and get testimonies of their care that they've received, fully holistic, looking at the patient as a whole person, you know, that time and attention they get, you know, and you don't get those lectures at med school. It's very pharma driven, protocol driven, medication, pill for every ill, as I call it.
Yeah. And every pill that you take for every ill has a side effect, which will create another ill. That's the whole purpose. That's how they make their profits.
Yeah. I mean, some elderly folk, I mean, just by the time they finish their last pill of the morning, they're on to the next round for their lunchtime. you know, and you look at the medicines and a lot of what the symptoms are when they come in to see you. You know, you can see, you know, this one interacts with this one, which you shouldn't be on that one at your age, and your kidney functions that, and no one really questions. And doctors are very good. I keep saying this to patients, of putting people on things and never questioning to take it off. So I'm on a big crusade at the moment to get these 80-year-olds off all these 50 pills that they take every day.
Oh, absolutely. I'm convinced that it is directly causing the extraordinary levels of dementia that we're seeing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't want to dig.
No, I know you agree. Listen, have you got any advice for people to detoxing and, you know, what they can do if they are feeling the effects of the vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, that seems to be the growth industry that I'm coming across more and more people who are vaccine injured. So, I mean, the problem with that, I said it to a person today who contacted me, desperate, being completely fobbed off. I mean, when I say I've heard horror stories, personal horror stories, I do a private telemedicine service, just to give that a plug. Yeah. Google me and you'll find the telemedicine.
What is the site again? Just
Spa Medical. So if you Google David Cartland, Dr. David Cartland, you'll find me on there, and I've got telemedicine slots for advice and signposting and advice. So a lot of the traffic coming through that is people that are vaccine injured. And I tell you, I've heard some sorry tales, and I feel so bad for these people. They're being fobbed off. People who've had the vaccine and have lost the use of their legs, people that have used the vaccine, and, you know, these military people, and they're suddenly fitting on the floor, their muscles are wasting, you know, myasthenia gravis a week after. I mean, I've seen people die within a week of the vaccine. There we go. Very good.
There you are. Super site. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
That's good. And yeah, that's thrown me now.
Spa Medical Services. Why do you call it spa? Is there?
It's not my company, to be fair. It's not. This is a guy who got in touch with me through Twitter, and it's his company. But we sort of branched out from there. Really, this is a new thing, really. But going back to the sort of vaccine injuries, what can they do? I mean, there's a few. I mean, you can go on different. A lot of these doctors who are speaking out, they're kind of they're offering protocols. So obviously Zev Zelenko, the dear Zev Zelenko had a protocol. Yeah. Other people, the World Council for Health have got a protocol that I use myself, because, you know, I'm not the same person as I was pre-vaccine, believe me, just in terms of energy levels and brain fogs, etc. And so, you know, I use these vitamins. It's natural things, really, vitamins and minerals and trace elements and things like nattokinase, milk thistle, NAC. These are all things that are good at detoxifying. I mean, the other thing I would say, apart from these regimes that you can find all over the place, pretty much, that's the one I use, just as personal recommendation. And there's things, I mean, this person I'll just use an example of now. You know, things like hyperbaric oxygen chambers. Yes. That's one thing people are having. Fasting regimes where people detox by fasting for 2 or 3 days and they feel $1 million afterwards.
Yes.
What else am I thinking about? Well, the problem I say with all of this, Gemma, is that we don't know the mechanisms. I mean, the World Council for Health last week did a brilliant talk. Ryan Cole, Pierre Corey spoke about what does spike protein do to the body. And again, they sat there and they citation after citation, reference after reference. I would recommend any of you viewers look at that, because I mean, it's the only time I've not slept in a few weeks because of that, watching that interview, because the guy, I mean, he presented paper after paper as to what this spike protein does in the human body. And, you know, when you step right back to first principle, we are training the human body to produce a viral protein, not only any viral protein, but the most pathogenic, toxic, inflammatory mediating protein of the whole nuclear capsid of the coronavirus. And what that does is, you know, the domino effect in the body. Watch the presentation. It has things, you know, issues around tumor suppression. You know, if you're stopping the immune system's there to fight infections. It's also there to screen for cancer and any aberrant cells in the system and kind of gobble them up a little bit. You know, and that's what happens with the immune system, and we're suppressing that. There's genes that, you know, if you're, you know, when you're reading the codes of the genetic sequence and then a mistake happens, there are things that come in and, you know, delete those errors like an editing process, and they're being blown away. So, you know, we're seeing that the spike protein is going across the blood-brain barrier, for example. You know, what will that do in the future? We don't know. The studies don't exist. So, you know, it's Russian roulette, really, with everyone.
Well, I think we are going to see a massive shift away from pharmacology, from the pharmaceutical-driven health service, and a move back to natural health and to those treatments that you've mentioned. People just, you know, getting into nature, getting into the sea, detoxing in the sea. You know, I was thinking, actually, I always think about, you know, when you go to the Mediterranean countries, you can go to these sulfur springs. You know, they have these big parks where you can just lie in these pools where you just, it's so powerful. It's sulfur and it's all of the brilliant salts. And, you know, you can clean out your nasal passages. And in Ireland and England, we're surrounded by water. And that whole, I mean, when we were under the Crown, there was a lot of those baths, you know, in the Victorian era, for example, all around the Irish coast. There were Victorian baths, but they've all been closed down in the last few decades. And like these would be seawater baths, so good for you. And yet in both of our islands, I think maybe in Cornwall or Bath, you might have them still. But I think that would be an amazing business to get into.
Well, anything holistic, anything cheap. I mean, going back to COVID, I mean, right at the beginning of this, you know, I've never known a disease where you've had no top-down approach to treating it. So we've got this killer worldwide pandemic on paper, but nothing was coming through. And I mean, at the time we're seeing, you know, lots of studies around, well, lots of things really. I know ivermectin takes the headlines a lot as being a wonder drug for these nice hydroxychloroquine, things like that. But vitamin D, zinc, things like I mentioned on the World Council for Health detox regime, they're not, these are kind of Helen Barrett's type products, you know, that we don't promote as doctors, you know, the whole nutrition, gut biome, functional medicine stuff that people, you know, doctors train away from generic pharmaco-driven medicine into functional medicine. And the results are amazing and astounding. There's lots of doctors who've stepped out and spoken like I have, who have become functional medics and took that holistic approach. Just give a quick plug actually to People's Health Alliance, who I'm the medical ambassador for, but again, that's what we've done there. We've developed in the UK and internationally now groups within communities now where we're kind of collating our skill sets. So the hypothetical is the health system collapses tomorrow. Where do you go for your health? And so we're setting up these community hubs now where, you know, we're not regulated because, you know, we own what we own in terms of our knowledge and our skills. And you know, people are coming together in a remarkable way. And it is literally, I think the slogan we use is by the people for the people, because that's what we're doing. We're sort of collating our group effort so that when it does go, if it does go, then we're there.
It needs to go. We don't need it. We don't need the health.
Have a little look at the website, People's Health Alliance UK.
Absolutely. Listen, David, I'm conscious that you've had a really busy few weeks and you're being put under an awful lot of pressure. So thank you so much. The audience is growing. I think we're at 500 now watching live on Getter and over 1,000 on my website. So thank you all, everyone, for joining in, and thank you for all. You are amazing, Dr. Cartland. You're getting so much support here. Everyone is thanking you for what you're doing, and you know, thank you from the bottom of my heart. That's all I can say. And I wish that your colleagues would find your courage, David.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Gemma. And that's the last thing I was doing, is a rallying cry really for these doctors. That, you know, I know you're scared. I know you see probably what's happened to me and other people like me, but just remember your oath. You know, when you look yourself in the mirror of an evening, you know, if you want to just focus on the children to start with, or pregnancy, you know, just look at them to start with. But you took an oath. Remember why you're doing it. And these taps on the shoulder are happening more and more frequently. So I know that people are waking up. I just wish, you know, all together collectively, we can stop this tomorrow. Just speak out, you know, remember why you did the job. Remember that med school interview you did. Why did you want to become a doctor? Remember the answer you gave to that question. You know, remember the oath when you stood up at your graduation ceremony, and whether it meant anything to you or whether it was the Porsche and the big mortgage and the secondary gains. Because for me, I've gained nothing from this. I've lost everything really, friends, family, neighbours, etc. And I've done it for my oath. I've done it for my patients, nothing more.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. Simple as that. No gain, nothing. I mean, reputational loss. But
it's the, you know, we know that adversity makes a person strong and fortune favors the brave, David. And, you know, I know that God is going to watch over you for what you've done, and you'll be rewarded. And in this world, you'll be able to hold your head up high and know that you're on the right side of history. And I'm sure in years to come, the generations that follow us will you will stand out as one of the leading lights during this time, no question. So
well, I think there's a prime minister vacancy in the UK at the minute.
Never know, although we don't want you getting into that horrible profession either. No, we need you to stay as a doctor, and I just again applaud you. You're absolutely fantastic, so articulate. You've given us such an insight into what's going on within the system, and I wish you every success in the rest of your career. You're really only starting out in many ways. I know you've a fantastic career ahead of you. So you'll come back on again, hopefully soon as well, will you?
If you'll have me, yeah, of course I will.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, listen, thank you, David, and thank you to everyone. The chat is just flying there. So sorry I wasn't able to read out more of the comments, but you'll definitely come on again soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourself, and we'll talk again very soon, David.
Thank you, Gemma. Cheers for having me.
Good night. God bless everyone.
Yeah.